Hi, this is your mini lecture for Chapter 9, Ethics and Information Technology. All right, so why are we looking at information technology issues and why is it important? Well, 30% of firms have fired workers for internet misuse. 28 have fired employees for misuse of corporate email. 6% had fired employees for misuse of corporate telephone. 66% of companies monitored employees' computers to determine which websites they'd been using. 65% stated they use software to block connections to inappropriate websites. 45% of companies monitored keystrokes and the amount of time spent on the computer and what type of content. 43% saved and reviewed computer files of employees. 84% notify employees they were monitoring their phone calls or phone usage. 24% have had emails subpoenaed for legal cases. 15% had to address workplace lawsuits that were the result of employee mail. And so there are just a lot of issues in terms of what is ethical in terms of information technology. So some of the issues are that we use IT in business as a way to gain a competitive advantage or a competitive position. But we also have to ensure that stakeholders' rights and needs are not sacrificed in order to just make profit. So there can be some conflict between management and then the policies in terms of information technology. So some are privacy, um, privacy in terms of having access and keeping private and personal information private. Ownership, who owns information that's been created and captured during operations of the firm. Control, systems that allow tracking of personal actions, movement, and communications. Accuracy, the sheer amount of data that's generated and how accurate that data is, and then keeping that data secure and both in collection, storage, use, and dissemination. So we have data policies which help to sort of address some of these issues. Intellectual property rights really look at who owns the IT when it's been developed. Usually if something's been developed for, like if you're doing work for a company and you develop intellectual property, it's owned by the company, usually, depending on what your contract says. And then workers' rights policy is monitoring personal information and then private versus public information. All right, so we have to, as managers and people in the workplace, make decisions based on our information we have and what to do with information. So when we're looking at our information technology decisions, we have to ask which stakeholders are impacted. What is the risk for each stakeholder? How do these decisions impact the interests of our stakeholders? And can one certain group of stakeholders be prioritized over another? So there's three theories we can look at. One is the utilitarian goal-based analysis, which says that we're going to make decisions that are going to produce the greatest good for the greatest number of stakeholders. So we're looking at maximum benefits. The rights-based is where we consider how our options impacts the rights of each stakeholder on things such as human rights, privacy, freedoms, and institutional rights. And then duty-based is evaluating decisions on whether the options available to the manager impact any of the fundamental duties of the manager. And these include being honest, fair, and truthful. So you kind of have to pick one of these viewpoints and then use that as your basis for decision making. All right, privacy of employees. Pretty much everybody uses email, and many of our emails go through our workplaces or our schools. Most email messages are not private. Under the 1986 Electronic Communications Privacy Act, employers can consider email message as corporate property. So if you send an email on your work email, it's their property. And emails can be subpoenaed and made public through court proceedings. Um, there's also monitoring of computers. So there is software that allows employers to see what is on the computer screen in an employer's office. And it allows the employer to determine how long a computer has been idle, so they'll know how long you've been working and how long you haven't. Again, though, there are some potential ethical concerns on whether this is an invasion of the employee's privacy. And so there's some questions that can be asked to determine if it is an invasion of privacy. So for what purpose is the personal knowledge sought? Is the purpose legitimate and important? Is the knowledge sought through invasion of privacy relevant to justifying its purpose? Is it the least offensive means of obtaining the information we need? What restrictions or procedural restraints have been placed on the privacy invading techniques? And how will personal knowledge be protected once it has been acquired? There's also telephone monitoring. Again, the 1986 Electronic Communications Privacy Act allows the monitoring of business-related phone calls. However, if the phone call is personal in nature, then the monitoring must stop. But if employees are told that personal calls are prohibited, then the call can be monitored. However, cell phones make this even more complicated. Um, for a variety of different reasons. In terms of, cell phones are usually private, sometimes they're owned by the company. There's all kinds of apps and so forth, which we can use for monitoring these days. So it just adds another layer of complexity. A lot of companies are also starting to use information technology to gather information about their customers, and you'll see that in your article I posted for you to read. And so we call this, there's this term called big data. Basically, firms are starting to collect large sets of data in order to help them customize their marketing or their product offerings for their customers. So you'll see again in the Target article I posted that Target gives every customer a customer ID, and they track what they buy and they market to them accordingly. And so this can provide some loss of anonymity for customers, the need or self-protection by customers, trying to understand how realistic are the data compared to real customer behavior, and then discrimination based on segmentation as well. All right, so some of the challenges of technology and internet usage include secure transactions. I've had my data stolen before. I've had people order things through my Sam's Club account. I think they got a computer and a TV. Luckily, I caught it in time. Legal activities, privacy, honesty, um, obviously things like pornography, targeting children, plagiarism, false advertising, unsolicited emails, and the list goes on and on. There are going to be fake payments. We've seen a lot of people are using the internet to buy products and products. Credit cards are stored online. People steal credit card data. People make fake purchases. Um, Fraudulent payments. So those are some issues. Intellectual property. If you think of Napster back in the day, downloading illegal songs, illegal downloading of movies and music. And we see this in larger proportions in some countries than others. There are some regulations related to this. There's a World Intellectual Property Organization that can monitor some of this. Electronic Commerce Directive, Sarbanes-Oxley. So we just really want to make sure that we're making sure our information security controls are up to date, designing information systems to prevent later auditing, holding our third-party service providers to high standards. So if we outsource our IT, making sure that they have privacy policies in place and procedures, and then monitoring personnel to prevent information misuse or loss. Here's a list of some of the fraud that comes about because of the internet. I'll let you read that. And there are internet attacks. So cyber terrorism is the use of IT to commit terrorism crimes. There can be vulnerable industries, and there can be email crimes, identity theft, viruses, spyware. All of these things are issues that happen in IT. And so basically, IT, again, can provide us with a competitive advantage, but we also have to realize that there can be a lot of ethical issues and unclear boundaries that we need to, and hard decisions that we need to make in terms of collecting data and using technology. And the USA Patriot Act really helps to strengthen and unite America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. And so this is one way to overcome what we were talking about, the cyber terrorism. So that's the mini lecture for chapter 9. Please contact me with questions. Thanks.